If you think you already know how the story of ice and fire ends, guess again, because the winds of winter are blowing.
The captain of the Huntress gave him a curious look. These are no mere reavers. The Ironmen have always raided where they could. They would strike sudden from the sea, carry off some golden girls, and sail away. But there were seldom more than 1 or 2 longships, and never more than half a dozen. Hundreds of their ships afflict us now, sailing out of the Shield Islands and some of the rocks around the arbor. They've taken Stone Crab Cay, the Isle of Pigs, and the Mermaid's Palace, and there are other nests on Horseshoe Rock and Bastard's Cradle. Without Lord Redwine's fleet, we lack the ships to come to grips with them. "What is Lord Hightower doing?" Sam blurted. "My father always said he was as wealthy as the Lannisters and could command thrice as many swords as any of Highgarden's other bannermen." "More if he sweeps the cobblestones," the captain said. "But swords are no good against the Ironmen unless the men who wield them know how to walk on water. The Hightower must be doing something." "To be sure, Lord Leighton's locked atop his tower with the Mad Maid, consulting books of spells. Might be he'll raise an army from the deeps. Or not. Baylor's building galleys, Gunther has charge of the harbor, Garth is training new recruits, and Humphrey's gone to lists to hire sails. If he can winkle a proper fleet out of his whore of a sister, we can start paying back the Ironmen with some of their own coin. Till then, the best we can do is guard the Sound and wait for the bitch queen in King's Landing to let Lord Paxter off his leash." The bitterness of the captain's final words shocked Sam as much as the things he said. If King's Landing loses Oldtown and the Arbor, the whole realm will fall to pieces, he thought as he watched the Huntress and her sisters moving off. "Oh my god, what do I do? Panic!" Oh wait.
I mean, everyone's kind of like sleeping on Lord Leighton, but maybe he might have some secret plans, and maybe there's something to his spell book. Maybe he's been up there for 10 years for a reason. He might come out like Gandalf when Euron gets there, like, "You shall not pass." I mean, we don't know yet.
It's cool. Yeah, no, steal all my jokes from 5 minutes ago. That's cool.
Yeah.
That's cool.
I stole your
I am LML, and this is Quinn, the joke stealer here, and we are here to talk Spooky Hightowers. Yay, Spooky Hightowers. What is he doing with the Book of Spells? Why has he been up there for 10 years? What the hell's going on in general with the Hightowers? Got that weird, creepy fortress under the Hightower and all kinds of stuff. We're going to go there. We're going to talk about deep ones, squishers, all kinds of mad, crazy things.
Weird things happening with the Hightowers. Yeah. So the Hightowers are pretty much like the most mysterious house in all of A Song of Ice and Fire. Well, along with House Dane, right? So, yeah. And now seems like
secondary house. Like the Starks are mysterious, obviously, but they don't count. They're the main, tertiary ones. You got your Blackwoods, your Danes, your Hightowers. Those are the ones that are like, tell us more.
Yeah. And so it seems like we're at a time right now where we'll like figure out what's going on with them, because Euron is, of course, about to attack Oldtown. And if they've got some magical secrets, like a lot of things have been alluding to, then perhaps this is the time when they come into play, when Euron is clearly like working up some magic, he's gathering holy blood and holy men, stirring up some kind of mess. Maybe they have something to defend against it. Like we said, he's been up there for 10 years. What has he been doing? Hopefully something useful.
I've got my suspicions. But we'll get to that. Starry Westham Church. Okay, so anyways, getting right. This is going to be a little bit of a conspiratorial one because there's not a lot to go on with the Hightowers. We don't have a lot of concrete info. We just have little drips and drabs. And like we mentioned in the Sam the Stealer episode, George has created the Citadel and the Hightowers as sort of this. They're very mysterious, but he can put anything in there. It's a mystery box. It's a Schrodinger's box that we haven't opened yet. Anything could be in there. Could be a dead cat. Could be an undead cat. We don't know. Some deep ones, a Palantir, any of it. We don't know. So it's lots of fun. But let's start with the most non-magical part, which is just the simple layout of Oldtown. It is a very cool city. It's got a quasi-Alexandria Egyptian vibe, sort of, and with the sphinxes and all that. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's like a mix of a lot of different places. It's really interesting looking. It's unique beauty. Yeah. I'd like to live in Oldtown. It seems like a much better place to live than somewhere like King's Landing, which seems very dirty and not very clean. Oldtown seems like an enlightened city, I would say. There's a lot of culture.
Right, and to sort of spell out the very beautiful, majestic look of Oldtown, we got a nice quote from A Feast for Crows as Sam sees it for the very first time.
As the night's mist burned away, Oldtown took form around him, emerging ghost-like from the pre-dawn gloom. Pate had never seen King's Landing, but he knew it was a daub and wattle city. A sprawl of mud streets, thatched roofs, and wooden hovels. Oldtown was built in stone, and all its streets were cobbled down to the meanest alley. The city was never more beautiful than at the break of day. West of the honey wine, the guild halls lined the bank like a row of palaces. Upriver, the domes and towers of the Citadel rose on both sides of the river, connected by stone bridges, crowded with halls and houses. Downstream, below the black marble walls and arched windows of the starry sept, the manses of the pious clustered like children gathered round the feet of an old dowager. And beyond, where the honey wine widened into whispering sound, rose the Hightower, its beacon fires bright against the dawn. From where it stood atop the bluffs of Battle Island, its shadow cut the city like a sword. Those born and raised in Oldtown could tell time. Those born and raised in Oldtown could tell the time of day by where that shadow fell. Some claimed a man could see all the way to the wall from the top. Perhaps that was why Lord Leighton had not made the descent in more than a decade, preferring to rule his city from the clouds.
All right, so we got a nice description, and then we got, of course, that last bit about Lord Leighton, preferring to rule his city from the clouds, up there for 10 years. Again, sounds very wizard-like. The guy's got to have like a nice long beard that he strokes like this, right?
Yeah. He lives in a tower, so that's very, like you said, wizard life. It's like Saruman again in the Lord of the Rings, since I brought up my totally original joke about the Lord of the Rings in the beginning, so he's kind of like Saruman in his tower, but
No, and he's called the Old Man of Oldtown too, which is really interesting. It's like conveys extra stature and status to him.
Heck yeah, and he's like looking down upon everyone. They think he's like up to nothing, but really he's protecting them all, potentially, maybe, hopefully.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about a couple of interesting times in history when the Hightowers have had to make some executive decisions. But the last thing about the physical description of Oldtown we want to talk about are those sphinxes. And there's a quick quote about that. It says, "The gates of the Citadel were flanked by a pair of towering green sphinxes with the bodies of lions, the wings of eagles, and the tails of serpents. One had a man's face and one a woman's." So that's pretty dramatic. Not sure what the deal is with those.
Yeah, the sphinxes are super cool because like they're kind of like out of place. You don't see really anything like that anywhere else in Westeros, and it's cool. It seems like that would be somewhere over in Essos and not here.
Yeah, the only other sphinxes we hear about are the Valyrian sphinxes in the throne room of King's Landing, left over from the Targaryen times, but they don't sound anywhere near as big and majestic as these ones, which are outside, sort of, giant ones flanking the gates of the Citadel. So very dramatic. And again, one has to wonder, as far as just as fantasy readers, we're just picking up the smell of magic and mystery here, like giant sphinxes, stuff we're about to talk about. So that's definitely a big marker there. So as far as that, those whiffs of magic, it starts off with their early history, of course. You guys are probably familiar with a lot of this from the World of Ice and Fire, so we won't dwell too long on it. But just a quick wrap up. They are considered one of the very oldest houses in Westeros. It says, "When first glimpsed in the pages of history, the Hightowers are already kings, ruling Oldtown from Battle Isle. The first High Tower, the chronicles tell us, was made of wood and rose some 50 feet above the ancient fortress that was its foundation."
I find it super awesome and like really epic that they were kings the first time they're seen in history. Like they've never been known to be anything other than, rulers. What were they before? I wonder. It's how did they rise to power? There's a lot of mystery tied to them, like we mentioned before.
Yeah, whoever they did it right from the start. And to this day, their wealth rivals that of the Lannisters. So they've maintained wealth and power for 8,000 years, 10,000 years. Like that's definitely something to
They've got to be doing something right. So
yeah, they're definitely good at politics. We've seen that with the Andal invasion and the Targaryen conquest. Both times they skillfully negotiated the situation to avoid, the worst possible outcomes. But there might be something more going on. Yeah. So, so Brandon the Builder is supposedly, he's rumored to have helped design or build the 5th and final Hightower. So it's another clue that this stuff goes all the way back to the Age of Heroes and the very ancient days, and that it's tied up with some of the most mythic figures in Westeros. Uthor of the Hightower himself is a mythic figure from the Age of Heroes. I mean, he married a daughter of Garth the Green, so that's nothing to sneeze at, right?
Definitely not. A daughter of Garth the Green. He doesn't have many of those.
That's true. It's going to be a short list. So then there's that Fused Stone Fortress, of course. If you know my stuff at all, I love talking about this thing. It's Fused Stone. It looks just like the Valyrian Fused Stone, except for it's reliably dated to before the Long Night, all the way back to the Dawn Age, before the Hightowers, before any of the towers, because they all sit on top of it. So it's one of the big clues that there was a race of dragon lords that existed before Valyria. I, of course, connect that to the Great Empire of the Dawn. We don't need to go into all that. I will have a video coming in April about that. But suffice it to say that the Fused Stone Fortress by itself says dragon lords were here, and we know it was pre-Valyrian. So that's a giant mystery, whether you like my theory or not. There's a big mystery there with this Fused Stone Fortress. So just sort of point that out. And to go along with it, there are rumors of dragons in the Ancient of Days.
How old is Oldtown truly? Many a maester has pondered that question, but we simply do not know. The origins of the city are lost in the mist of time and clouded by legend. Some ignorant septons claim that the Seven themselves laid out its boundaries. Other men that dragons once roosted on Battle Isle until the first Hightower put an end to them.
Makes sense, right? If it's Fused Stone, then there were dragons there one time, and so we have some folkloric tales of dragons.
Yeah, totally. It makes sense. And there's other stories of dragon lords in Westeros, as I'm sure you know. Or other hints of dragons in Westeros before the Targaryens and before the Valyrians, potentially.
Yep, there's dragon bones that the maesters have found, and there's a few tales of dragon slayers. And you can't have dragon slayers without dragons, so...
Exactly. Yeah, so the curious thing about the Hightowers, too, is that their house goes back so long, and we know so little about their origins that they could potentially have come to Westeros before the first men, even. It says at some point, we know that Battle Isle and its great stronghold came into the possession of the ancestors of House Hightower. Were they the first men, as most scholars believe today, or did they mayhaps descend from the seafarers and traders who had settled at the top of Whispering Sound in earlier epochs? The men who came before the first men. All right, so that's curious and pretty epic as well. They were kings
men who came,
and they came before the first men, potentially. So really, the Starks don't have anything on them, almost.
No, and just that phrase, "the men who came before the first men," that sort of raises the hair on the back of your neck a little bit. It's like, wow, who were they? Were they Squisher people? Were they, those pre-Valyrian dragon lords? Were they? We don't know. It's a pretty interesting question. So all that is to say that right from the beginning, Oldtown is very mysterious, very magical, right from the founding all the way through their existence. So just about anything could be inside that tower when somebody cracks it open and takes a look. Cough, cough, Euron.
After he kills Lord Leighton with his bare hands.
We'll see. We have to have a wizard battle first.
All right, so next we're going to talk about how the Hightowers founded the Citadel. So we have another quote here that says, though powerful and immensely wealthy, the lords of the Hightower have traditionally preferred trade to battle and have seldom played a large part in the wars of Westeros. The Hightowers were instrumental in the founding of the Citadel and continue to protect it to this day. Subtle and sophisticated, they have always been great patrons of learning and the faith, and it is said that certain of them have also dabbled in alchemy, necromancy, and other sorcerous arts. So that's very curious. So they're quite learned people that value learning and knowledge of all kinds, and certain of them are even willing to dabble into the arcane arts, the more esoteric arts in the world of Ice and Fire.
And that came in the A Feast for Crows appendix. It's not in any of the other appendices, only in A Feast for Crows appendix. Kind of interesting. That's the book where we learn the most about the Hightowers. And so George drops in this little clue in the very back about alchemy and necromancy and sorcery. What's that? And we actually find out in the World of Ice and Fire, the origins of the Citadel are almost as mysterious as those of the Hightower itself. Most credit its founding to the second son of Uthor of the Hightower, Prince Paramore the Twisted. A sickly boy, born with a withered arm and twisted back, Paramore was bedridden for much of his short life, but had an insatiable curiosity about the world beyond his window. So he turned to wise men, teachers, priests, healers, singers, along with a certain number of wizards, alchemists, and sorcerers. It is said the prince had no greater pleasure in life than listening to these scholars argue with one another. When Paramore died, his brother King Uragon bequeathed a large tract of land beside the Honeywine to Paramore's pets, that they might establish themselves and continue teaching, learning, and questing after the truth. And that was the origin of the Citadel. So
Yeah, it's super awesome that it goes back that long and that they've been doing what they do for so long. I mean, they're so intertwined with, you know, the history of everything that's gone down in Westeros. I wonder how much they know secretly and how much knowledge they have just amongst, I don't know, hidden away.
yeah, those books of spells. That's why we started off with that quote. Like, books of spells, the Hightowers probably have like the good ones.
Or just even secrets about what's really gone down in Westeros that they could have like their own accounts of history.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, again, anything that George wants, he can put inside the Hightower or the Citadel, and it will be believable as far as arcana and lore and all that stuff. So, and then the last thing about the founding of the Citadel, actually, no, there's two things. So Paramore, check this out. It's kind of a fringe theory back from Westeros.org days, but Paramore he's got a bent back and a crooked arm, and he didn't live long. So some people were like, could he be a child of the forest hybrid maybe? Because we know that the hybrid offspring are often kind of crippled and shrunken and they don't live long and stuff like that. And then there's the fact that Uthor, like we said, married a daughter of Garth the Green. The thing about Garth the Green is he's described as, he sounds like one of the Sacred Order of Green Men. He has green skin and antlers and all this stuff, and who knows what the truth of that is, but the Green Men are closely connected to the Children of the Forest. Maybe they're related species of elves or something like that. So the idea that Uthor married a daughter of Garth and one of his children kind of looks like a Child of the Forest hybrid, and then collected a bunch of wizards and magicians together to learn information. I don't know, it's you know, maybe here nor there, but it's an interesting theory. And then there's this quote here about some of the first maesters actually living amongst the Children of the Forest. It says, "We can state with certainty, however, that men have lived at the mouth of the Honeywine since the Dawn Age. The oldest runic records confirm this, as do certain fragmentary accounts that have come down to us from maesters who lived amongst the Children of the Forest." Wow.
Maesters who lived amongst the Children of the Forest. Now that's super interesting. So they're kind of like immigrants that just they went to go live with another country for a while to like study the people, like a cultural anthropologist almost.
Yes, exactly. A cultural anthropologist. That's it. And the thing that I wonder about is the history. You were talking about maybe the Hightowers have some really good ancient history. It's a little more accurate. Well, if they were studying with the Children of the Forest, one of the reasons why the Children of the Forest might have allowed the maesters to study with them is so that they could influence mankind. And so it's very possible there was an exchange of information. And we know the Children of the Forest, of course, have the real history because they have the Weirwood Net.
Mm-hmm.
So that is a very interesting connection to me.
Absolutely.
And it also stands in stark contrast, of course, to the modern Citadel, which, jumping ahead a little bit, I've got this quote from Marwyn the Mage about the Citadel and their view on magic. And you guys all know it, but I'll just read it real quick. He says, "Who do you think killed all the dragons the last time around? Gallant dragon slayers armed with swords. The world the Citadel is building has no place in it for sorcery or prophecy or glass candles, much less for dragons. Ask yourself why Aemon Targaryen was allowed to waste his life upon the wall, when by rights he should have been raised to Archmaester. His blood was why. He could not be trusted no more than I can."
All right. So yeah, it's a stark difference from how clearly the Citadel once viewed the arcane arts. it wasn't once okay, they wouldn't even have a Valyrian steel like chain link. So obviously, at some point, it was something that people were doing that they were learning about. But you have to wonder, like, what happened? Why? What created the shift?
Yeah, you can see what did, not how it happened, but what was the end result. Like Maester Luwin has a Valyrian steel link. He studied Arcana, but his conclusion was the safe conclusion that the Citadel wants everyone to come to, which is like, yeah, magic used to be a thing, but it's basically gone now. So it's like it used to be taught as like a main course, and now it's taught as a way to like tamp down interest in it. What is interesting is the idea that the Hightowers themselves are into magic, potentially still. Meanwhile, the Citadel is not. So one wonders about the tension there. I believe Starry Wisdom cultists are at the head of all this stuff, and that all that anti-magic stuff is, there's people inside the Citadel that don't hold that view necessarily, but we can cross our fingers for intermaester politics conflict in Winds of Winter, I guess.
Heck yeah.
Now, one interesting thing, and again, jumping around in the document here a little bit, I've got something about the Grey Plague that I found while rifling through the histories. And there was a time Pycelle talks about when he was a boy, the Grey Plague came to Oldtown, and the Lord of the Hightower burned every ship in the port, closed the gates, commanded the guards to slay all those who tried to flee. And he basically did the right thing. On the day they reopened the port, they dragged him from his horse and slit his throat. And the ignorant still spit at the sound of his name, but he did the right thing because he basically sealed it in and didn't allow it to get out. So I just wonder with, Grayscale coming to Westeros, Euron attacking, I wonder if we'll see similar quarantine type of situation either at Oldtown or elsewhere.
Yeah, maybe so. Yeah, like we said, John Connington is totally being reckless, just going to one of the most, going to the most populated cities in Westeros and, like shaking hands with people and stuff. He needs to like chill. But I was also thinking that maybe that quote could like also like maybe reference potentially what could happen with Leighton Hightower, because it's kind of looked at as like nobody that's not really helping anyone. But maybe he is. Maybe he will do something that actually helps, but it won't be seen as something that helps, like similar to this.
I could absolutely see that. That makes a lot of sense, actually. That's why I grabbed that passage. I was like, oh, this is a really compelling little bit of history that George wrote. And this might be the kind of thing he, wanted to use as a foreshadowing. So yeah, maybe Lord Leighton will get dragged down from his lofty tower. I think Euron's going to set up shop there for a minute. Because speaking of foreshadowing, there's that Isle of Ravens where the Ravenry is. And it says it used to be the stronghold of a pirate lord in the Age of Heroes. And yeah, it just sounds too convenient.
Yes. Oldtown will definitely fall to Euron.
And speaking of Euron, there's a tiny little chance, some people think, that Hands of White Fire Lady is Melora Hightower, based on the fact that there isn't an obvious contender for Hands of White Fire Lady. Euron's in Oldtown, and she's called the Mad Maid, and she's up there with the Book of Spells with Leighton. So maybe she's kind of a sorceress lady. And the quote, basically, we don't need to read the whole thing, but Damphair is seeing Euron on the throne, and he's got squid face, is a boiling blood sea, and then it says, beside him stood a shadow in woman's form, long and tall and terrible, her hands alive with pale white fire. So he's going to have some sort of sorceress girlfriend. Maybe that's Dany. Maybe that's the dragon Viserion. Maybe that's Melisandre. Maybe it's the Mad Maid, though.
Perhaps if she's in Oldtown when he gets there and she's like, hey, I can help you or something. Maybe, perhaps. Or he's like, yeah, help me or I'll kill you.
Yeah, Euron. Anyone who does a deal with Euron, it's like not headed in a good place. So a couple of other loose tidbits about the modern Hightowers, just real quick. They do have a Valyrian steel sword. It's called Vigilance, which makes sense. They have a watchtower, Vigilance. They married into the Targaryen line, of course, during the Dance of the Dragons. There's conspiracies about maybe they were trying to actually kill the dragons. But the point is that they're a very powerful and estimable family, which the Targaryen royal line saw as an appropriate match. And of course, like we said, Leighton hasn't come down in 10 years. He's up there reading magical books. And that's pretty much the end of what we know about the Hightowers, which means it's time to talk about squishers.
Squishers. The
Squish,
deep ones
squish.
are real, guys. Like I was saying that we need a deep one shirt that says the deep ones are real. The deep one conspiracy is true, guys. They're coming. They're coming. Don't believe what this guy says.
Squish, 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 squish. I love the deep ones, nimble dick crab, all that stuff. I am tempted to make a whole conspiracy theory about the deep one Empire of the Dawn. But point is, what Martin seems to be wanting to tell us is that they do exist around the margins of the world of Ice and Fire. It's less likely that we'll actually see them come into play. Maybe Biters, a Merling, maybe Varys, but probably not.
There's all the myths and legends, and then there's talk of like different, maybe like races of them, more mean ones and aggressive ones that live in the north, and kind of friendlier ones that live in the south, perhaps, that might save you if they drag you underwater, like they did with Patchface potentially, and all sorts of stories in this. So
yeah, my crackpot, my ultra crackpot, is that before the Arm of Dorne was collapsed, the Shivering Sea was separated in the north from the Summer Sea in the south, and so the Merlings and Selkies, the two kinds or whatever, were like separated. But when the land bridge came down, then there was a great mingling and a civil war, and under the sea, I know. So why are we talking about squishers in connection to the Hightowers? Well, there's two reasons. One is that throwaway line about maybe will summon an army from the deeps, maybe not. Who knows? It's given sarcastically, but yeah, it's interesting.
Watch it happen.
Yeah, but the other thing is that Archmaester Theron, who's the author of that weird book, Strange Stone, notices certain similarities between the Fuse Stone Fortress at Battle Isle and the Sea Stone Chair. And we don't need to read the whole quote, but basically he thinks that maybe they're both the work of some, what does it say? Oh yes, the work of a queer misshapen race of half-men sired by creatures of the salt seas upon human women. These deep ones, as he names them, are the seed from which our legends of Merlings have grown, he argues, whilst their terrible fathers are the truth behind the drowned god of the Ironborn. So...
yeah, so he's comparing it to Fuse Stone. So there's examples of Fuse Stone all over the world of Ice and Fire. There's also a couple examples of also more stuff that's like the Sea Stone Chair, like there's the Idol, Toad Isle. So the Merlings they've been leaving their artifacts all over the place and just like disappearing.
Yeah, so Yin, the Oily Stone, and I've done spent way too much time researching Oily Stone and Fuse Stone. The Oily Stone is at Toad Isle in the Basilisks. It's at Yin, which is not far away. It's at Ashai. It's on the Sea Stone Chair. And there's a passage where Moat Cailin, which is one time said to be made out of black basalt, it says the coats look like they were, or the blocks look like they were coated in a fine oil. So it could be that Moat Cailin is Oily Stone. I think it is because it matches Yin's construction exactly. But that's a little far afield. Not that far afield. We always love talking about Oily
the deep
Stone.
ones are coming. Well, they can survive off land for quite some time. So
you tell me, you're the expert. I mean, I don't know. Long enough to come and steal babies anyways. That's the important thing. So the other reason why we're talking about them is because a fair amount of the mermaid, Selkie, Merling legends are near Oldtown, in the relatively near region. So the Shield Islands are nearby, and they have a myth about Owen Oakenshield, a son of Garth the Greenhand, conquering the islands and driving the Selkies and Merlings back into the sea. So that's just a little bit north up the coast from Oldtown. It's the entrance of the Mander, which is how you get to Highgarden. And then there's a place called the Mermaid's Palace. It's a small isle off the coast of the Arbor, which is, again, very close to Oldtown. And then, of course, the Iron Islands are just a little bit further up the coast, and they've got, that's the treasure trove of Deep One's mythology.
Heck yeah. There's like you said, a treasure trove. It's all over the place. Their god is served by Merlings in his watery halls. So it goes all the way down to their religion.
So that's just the kind of thing here. Like, around the margins of the world, George wants to show us these ancient Lovecraftian races. Shout out to your Lovecraft video, which you just put out tonight. It'll be out a couple weeks ago by the time you watch this, but magic of time travel and editing. But yeah, so George is tucking these deep ones around the margin, and there are some places where they're just sort of peeking out a little more than others. And Oldtown is one of those places. We got the Fuse Stone, we got these old myths, you know, we got lots of Selkies lurking around, and then we've got Euron sailing there with an intent to do dark magic. Lord Leighton up top practicing magic. Definitely, you know, something's going to go down here. So leave your this.
No, I was gonna say we're clearly gonna have a battle of wizards. We got dark magic wizard Euron with his sea blood magic, and we've got Lord Leighton. He's been in the tower for 10 years, studying, getting ready because he saw it in a prophecy like 10 years ago, and he's been preparing for this his whole life. Sucks that he's gonna get killed though.
Yeah, I wouldn't bet on Lord Leighton against Euron for sure. But this definitely is a leave your comments video. You know, we want to hear it. Let us know what do you think could happen? What kind of fireworks will be a Horn of Winter thing? Will it be a blood magic Kraken thing? A magical storm? Is Euron just going to set up in Oldtown? Does Lord Leighton have a surprise? Does Melora, is she going to be somebody? So yeah, leave your comments. Let us know, folks. Can't wait for this plot line.
Yeah. And thank you guys so much for watching. Make sure you like and subscribe for more videos. Click on both of our channels, links in the description.